Hello everyone and welcome to this week's video. This week, as I mentioned in last week's video, I thought it'd be really fun to do a summer palette challenge. Now I love doing palette challenges as it's a great way to test yourselves with your colouring skills, to be able to do different things and to be able to expand your standard colour palette. I tend to stick to very either warm or earthy tones or very cool tones, so this is a really good way to actually expand my palette and try something different. Now when it comes to actual summer palettes, there are different types of palettes depending on the colour scheme of outfits or choice, and after writing a few down and basically swatching colours, if you do a very quick search up on Google, go hey I want a summer palette challenge, it will give you a cool palette, a pastel palette, a warm palette, a bright palette, and of course a soft palette as well. And thinking on these, I really wanted to do something with fashion. I was really inspired to do something very colourful and bright and thought, hey, let's do some fashion witches. So after swatching a few colours and trying to decide on what kind of ideas I was going for, I decided after a bit what kind of fashion each one represented to me. So for bright fashion, I decided to go for a very 80s fun colour palette, very bright, very colourful. For cool, I was thinking bohemian sort of fashion style. Pastel, immediately I thought Lolita. Soft, I thought cottagecore. And warm, I was feeling like a 1950s sort of summery vibe to it. After I decided on what kind of thing I wanted to do, did some very quick sketches. This is the Strathmore sketchbook, by the way. It's just sort of ideas that I was having after definitely deciding on what I wanted to do. That's when I switched over to my A3 paper. After deciding on what I was doing, I very quickly sketched out the body shapes of each character and then was going to build up the colours and build up the fashion from there. Trying to give each character a different personality just from the way their stances are, where their clothing is, and going from there overall. The thing that was really super important to me is that each one is very different but all feels very summery at the same time. So the first one I did was the bright one, deciding on what kind of colour palette I was going for. I knew I really wanted an 80s vibe and I was still feeling very summery and bright. So quickly sketching that out and giving myself a rough ideas. I wanted a really colourful cardigan, a block colour skirt, a tank top, and maybe some colourful tights or leggings and very colourful trainers. As for the 1950s vibe, I was going for 50s pin-up / 50s summer wear. So I was thinking like high-waisted shorts and maybe like a halter top with very warm colours and wedge sandals. Bohemian, I wanted to have the big sort of oh gosh, what they're called, parachute pants, I believe. Wanted that sort of vibe with a shawl and maybe a sort of halter top or a crop top in a way. And for Lolita, I was thinking that strawberry dress that goes around everywhere, which is absolutely gorgeous, and I would love to have it on my body, but that's £500 I do not have. And as for the last one, soft, I immediately thought cottagecore. Cottagecore is very soft aesthetic fashion, long skirts, big floofy shirts, and I was just like, yes, this is everything. So for the full list of equipment that I am using, this is an A3 Faber-Castell mixed media paper. I'm using Unipin fine liners, a mixture of different ranges. I tend to go anything from 0.1 to 0.8. This gives me nice variation in thickness of line, and afterwards go over with the brush pen to get the variation of line weight that I want. I'm also using my alcohol markers. The particular brand that I like to use is Promarkers. It's one of my all-time favourites. And on top, I build texture with Winsor & Newton colours and Polychromos. So I'm using watercolours and pencils to build up texture on top. What I like to do, as usual, is I like to put my flat layer of my markers down, do a little bit of shading with markers, and then build up texture on top. This just helps an illustration not feel so flat from just markers alone, and it really builds up that sort of like style that I was after. So it's sort of an interesting way to kind of choose a colour palette that really vibes with you. In particular, I'm really drawn to the cool summer palette and the soft colour palette as well. But that's really interesting to see what kind of colour palettes people would go for. And if you were to recreate this in your own style, what colour palette would you choose for your summery colour palette? When I think of summer, I think of very warm tones. I think of greens, oranges, yellows. I think of bright hot pinks, very warm purples. It tends to be with a summer palette, I tend to think on the warmer side of the spectrum when it comes to colours. But it was very interesting to me when I was doing a little bit of research as to what kind of summer palettes are out there. And since I just couldn't choose one, I thought this was a really fun project to choose all the different types of colour palettes. And it would be really fun to do some fashion witches next season. So we'll do an autumn or a fall colour palette, and choose like different colour palettes to go with that. So let me know if you're interested in that, because I think palette challenges are a really fantastic way to broaden your horizons when it comes to using colour in general. I find that as artists, we find a colour palette that really gels with us, and we just tend to, well, keep to that colour palette and not spread out. And sometimes when you find a colour palette that works for you, it's fantastic. You know, it works for your work, it works elsewhere, but it's also really good to expand on what you would normally work on. It helps you with a better understanding of when it comes to colouring. I know it really helps me when it comes to colouring, if I understand how different colours blend with each other. And it's also a really good way of playing around with your markers or playing around with your pencil crayons or watercolours to try and test the regions to see what you could do more of. And I've done plenty of palette challenges up on this channel. It is something that I am very passionate about, but if it's something that you definitely do, let me know in the comment section down below and tag me if you use one of these palettes. I want to see what kind of picture you would create using the same palette. So now that we've done the outlines for all of them, we're going to colour and get on. So I was tackling one witch at a time. This was so that I could get the base colours down and then build up texture on top. And one thing that was very common throughout these palettes was the same colours were consistently being used. The warm tones that were consistently used all the way throughout. You had red, oranges and yellows, and they all seemed to be on the warmer side of the spectrum, as well as like the pinks and so on and so forth. By choosing the bright colours, I was trying to make sure that none of this was clashing too much. Although I really wanted an over-the-top bright palette, it had to be cohesive at the same time and not seem like it was overbearing. To be honest, I probably would switch around the colours of the skirt and the leggings. However, I feel like the pink makes it a lot warmer just because you have all those warm tones out there, which is a good central point, and it ties in with the hat. However, I think the leggings are probably my least favourite part of this piece, just because I feel like they distract too much, whereas all the other colours seem very cohesive and very much together. That colour that's bright in the leggings needed to be tied somewhere else, but I was trying to keep it so that everything was very cohesive, very much going together. And I really love her hat. It reminds me of like a purple cotton candy. It makes me so happy. And just trying to shade so that everything stayed very warm and very bright. because obviously she's a very bright girl. And when it comes to the warm colour palette, I was trying to think of very warm tones, building up texture on top. And apologies that you keep on seeing my cat throughout this footage. For some reason, she's been very needy lately, very cuddly, and whenever I'm working decides that she must be centre of attention, of course. This was probably the most difficult to colour in, because when it came to the warm palette, I hadn't given her very much to clothe her. She hadn't had a lot of clothing on top of her, so it was trying to get all those colours that I wanted on there and trying to build up all the texture. Maybe the flower should have definitely been a different colour because it blends in too much with her hair, but I was trying to keep all those very warm tones all together. But if I'd done a different colour hat, maybe I would have done a different colour flower. The flower should have been like purple or pink or something to contrast against all that orange, but then there would have been nothing to tie that colour in for the rest of the illustration as well. Decided that she wanted a straw hat because I was getting very Hawaiian vibes from her outfit, like Hawaiian beach vibes, and I really wanted to give her a giant straw hat because it just fit in with summer and happiness. I think my favourite out of all of these has to be the Cool palette. I am in love with these pants. This is possibly my favourite part I've done. I just love the patterning on here. It did take quite a while, so there is a bit of a skip so that you don't end up seeing every little bit that's on here, but you get the general idea. I was just building up shapes with different colours and then just keep on building up the colours on top of it again and again and again to try and get the desired effect that I was after, trying to keep a cohesive colour palette going throughout so that it wasn't too much. But there is the final results of those pants, and I am in love. Absolutely in love with them. Trying to keep those colours tied all the way throughout, and the most brightest colour I wanted to be her hair, just because there was so much coldness that was going on in this palette. I really wanted to warm it up a little bit, so that's why you see pops of orange, pink, and as well as that beautiful teal colour, which I'm obsessed with. Next was Pastel colour palette. This one is, I think, my second favourite. I think I ended up going a bit too warm with the colours in general, as pastel colours tend to be very soft and tend to be on the cooler side of the spectrum. I think I ended up going a little bit too bright with them, so it definitely could have been improved upon later on and had a throwback to them maybe. But overall, I really dig the aesthetic of this colour palette. It is so colourful, it's so bright, and honestly, I'll probably end up using these colours in the future because peach and yellow just look so nice with each other that I never would have thought to have used them together in a sense. Going through and doing these strawberries was an awful lot of fun as well. I ended up using a little bit of acrylic marker afterwards to pop those little stems out that I couldn't quite achieve with the finalized product. I think my least favourite part in this illustration is the tights, mainly because that colour is not throughout the illustration. The only places that it could possibly tie is her hair colour and maybe the brim of the hat, but it seems to stand out in the wrong sort of way. If I was to do this again, I would definitely keep it on the softer side, maybe choose a softer green, not choose that purple without a doubt, maybe use the blue to tie back to the blue hair, going into green so that we'd have a gradient there. But you know, you live and you learn. Sometimes you've got to try overall. And last, which is possibly a lot of people's favourite aesthetic at the moment because it's very, very popular, was the soft, which is the cottage core. There's a lot of deep colours here, so I was trying to balance out the deep colours with the lighter colours by concentrating the deeper colours on her hair and her skirt. This brings up the attention more towards those areas, and decided that the shirt was a little bit too plain, so put some like little light flowers all over using very softer tones, so that we could draw the colours from the hat and back to the overall illustration. So trying to find that balance between warm and cool as well. So after we've done that, we take the time and build up texture on top with watercolours. This is because sometimes I find that markers feel a little bit too flat, and I really enjoy building up texture on top. This helps deepen shadows, helps bring attention to areas which I would like to be slightly darker that I can't achieve with markers alone. This helps my colour palette not be too tight in one area. I tend to shade with purples a lot, and this is really good when you are doing a warm colour palette, but I was trying to make those colours a little bit more stand outish, not seem so cold in comparison, and build up texture. This is a really good way of balancing your colour palette that you are choosing, and overall it's really fun to colour in. Like, I highly recommend it. So which of these palettes is your all-time favourite? Which one would you definitely use in the future? I'm in particular, like I said, I'm really drawn to the Cool palette. I really love the way that one's come out in particular, but I would love to see what you would do with a summer palette challenge. Will you take these and what will you do with them? I think it's amazing to try and broaden our horizons and do something that we would not normally do. Plus, it's really fun. It's a really good portfolio workout as well. So you can do some character designs, you can do some different aspects of different things. And here is the overall look of all three of them, finalized with all the color illustrations. And let me know what you think down below. Which one is your favorite? And now it's time to feature some of your amazing work that you have tagged me in. I really appreciate all the love and support with this channel. I cannot thank you all enough, and I think you all are amazing artists. If you want to follow me for more content, make sure to subscribe, and we put out new videos every Thursday and do streams most Sundays. Make sure to check out the Discord for more information. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and as always folks, stay creative.